Welcome to the Brave Feminine Leadership podcast. This is where I get to dive into delicious conversations with global leaders, and we get to soak up their wisdom and perspective on all things life and leadership. And today I am so excited to be joined by Emma Olivier. Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Melissa. It's a delight to be here.
So, how about I kick off by sharing your bio so people who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before will know who I'm talking to? So,
Fantastic.
Emma is a seasoned board director with extensive governance experience, currently serving as a non-executive director at Wannon Water, Housing Hub, and GOTAFE. She also holds independent committee roles at Scope, Wellways Australia, and the Victorian Auditor General's Office. Emma is deeply passionate about increasing representation of people with disabilities in boardrooms and governance positions across Australia. As the founder and CEO of 20%, Emma leads a consultancy dedicated to advancing disability inclusion initiatives for organisations. Having been born without a left hand, she brings personal insight to her professional work, understanding firsthand the challenges and opportunities of navigating corporate Australia with a disability. Emma, as I said, I'm thrilled to have you here with us. How about we kick off with me just asking you simply, who are you as a human being?
Great question, and a big question for a Friday morning as well. Um, when I think about who I am, I think about the fact that, yeah, as you said, I do have a disability, and it is absolutely core to who I am. So for people playing along at home, was born without a left hand. I I think of all the things that I do, and it's hard to sort of come down to sort of a succinct sentence. As you said, I'm a non-executive director. I love having deep conversations around disability inclusion in unexpected places, and we can get into that later in our discussion. I've got a long consulting career. About 20 years at Accenture over two stints. I'm very passionate around my community and where I live. I'm a big volunteer person. Um, and I'm a family member as well. So I'm a mother. There's lots of things I'm not good at. So often when I listen to these types of conversations and I hear these amazing women, and I think, how do they have it all together? There's lots of my parts of my life I don't have together. Um, but yeah, and I'm recently just turned 55, so I feel like I'm on the on the cusp of the next part of my career. I have lots of things that I want to keep doing, and I feel quite happy to be in the place that I am. And I was going to say lucky, and
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk about that later, but I feel very blessed that I'm here where I am, but I don't feel lucky because I've worked incredibly hard. I'm a university student. I'm doing a part-time graduate certificate at Deakin in Disability and Inclusion. So I'm a learner.
Mm.
And I think I'm a connector as well. I think that would be another part. I like connecting processes and systems and people. I love meeting people and hearing their stories. And that's what I think networking is all about. And I was having this conversation with my son a couple of days ago that you always should leave well. He was leaving a part-time job much earlier in his career. And I think that has been a theme of my life, that I've always taken parts of my journey with me to the next part of my journey.
Mm.
And having that connection, and you never know where people reappear in your life, and both personally and professionally, and it's really served me well.
Amazing. So, for people listening at home, Emma showed us before on YouTube. You'll have the pleasure of seeing her hold her arms up, but the people at home won't have seen that. So, just to explain that you did that, I love your response to that question in terms of who are you as a human being, and because it was really thoughtful, and I didn't give you a lot of notice about how you were going to answer that either. We were all prepped for you to talk about your career and talk about all those other sorts of things. But I love people's thoughtful responses to that and great advice to your son. Let's go through, I mean, let's go right back and you had this long, incredible career at Accenture.
Yeah,
I want to understand all the ups and downs and twists and turns and, then let's really focus on starting 20% because I know that
yeah.
was a big, big decision for you. And then, you're combining that now with a non-executive director career on board. So let's go right back to how did you end up at Accenture? What did you want to be when you were little?
I want to be a librarian. And I actually did my work experience at the State Library of Victoria because I thought, well, if you're going to be a librarian, you should be the best librarian you could be. And I did that experience and I thought, actually, just because I love books doesn't mean I actually want to file them away. And in the 80s, it was all about contacting the books. So I think there is a good thing of try something on and
Yeah.
try. And I did volunteer in my local library on a Saturday morning because I thought, well, just to try it on. So that's what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I'm still a great reader, but I just definitely don't think that would have been the right career. I did a Bachelor of Business in Accounting, so I loved numbers and I loved people, and I thought being an accountant would be a great combination of those two strengths. I did try on accounting. I became qualified as a chartered accountant at Arthur Andersen many years ago. And it actually occurred to me that I would be correcting other people's work.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, actually, again, I don't think this is quite the right fit. Um, we're now in the early 90s. There was a job advertised that said you needed a finance background on a project. And it happened to be an IT project. And that's really what started my career. In IT and in systems implementations. Again, I took what I had some skills in. I played to my strength, which was finance. So I started in that area and I just loved it. I loved the project work. I loved the fact that you were building something. And I loved the intersection between technology and people and how to do that translation. So that real business analyst.
Mm.
Um, I'm a Gemini, so I like a bit of variety. And I think that project career really gave me that variety. I also like a bit of adventure, so I was able to live in South Africa, live in London, live in Copenhagen, live
Wow.
in Rome, did some work in Asia as well. So the joy of working, it was then Anderson Consulting that came Accenture in the early 2000s was there was always another project to go to. There's always a new challenge to step up to. And there was always a new country to go to. And I felt quite fortunate that I was able to combine that. And I had a very long career at Accenture. I had two tours of duty. So I left in 2015 and went and worked for a couple of other organisations, then came back about 5 years later. Um, and I always found new things to do, new people to work with. I was always challenged. I was never bored.
What it's interesting. So many people I work with, I hear so many different things, but some people say I had a very long career at one place. Does that mean I'm entrenched? What's my value to go and do something else? Then I hear other people who long career somewhere, go somewhere, come back. What was the draw card to come back? Like what was going on for you at that point in time?
When I left because I didn't get promoted to managing director.
Wow.
And it was I think it was, I felt deeply hurt. I
Yeah.
felt deeply let down. And I felt like my ego took a big, big fat bruising. And when I think of the things and I reflected on it. I sort of stayed there for a couple of months after I didn't get promoted. And I thought, no, I need to go and have a career somewhere else. I need to go and do something else. So I had what I call my breakup job, which was going to work for a very small non-for-profit. So I'd gone from a big global firm and I went to a very small firm and I lasted about a year
Yeah.
and then got headhunted to go to work for a private equity organizations. And then eventually got headhunted to go back to Accenture as a managing director.
Right.
And I think for me, and it turned out I actually didn't like being a managing director, but I was really grateful for the fact that I got to try the code on.
Yeah.
And I got to, I think, satisfy that itch. And I was reflecting on it this morning around, when you get hard pieces of advice and what that teaches you. Me not getting that promotion was the best thing that ever happened to me in hindsight. I don't think I was ready for it.
Yeah.
And I think it really made me reflect what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. I feel grateful that I was able to go back and try it on and then come to the realization it gave me the courage to go and try something else.
Mm,
Um, and I think even though at the time I perceived it as a massive failure, and I think at the time was defined by who I was at work and my title and my career. And, almost it was 10 years later, we are so much more than our titles. We are so much more than who we work for.
yeah.
Um, but, if I had to give advice to my 45-year-old self was it would be okay. There is a world outside of Accenture.
Mm,
And I'd only really thought about leaving in those last few months. It was the only time that I left. Why did I stay there for so long? Because I was always challenged. It's the
yeah.
joy of a big organization, a global organization. And Accenture is very, very good at finding the new things, the new technology, and they always reinvented themselves.
Mm.
So I felt I was able to reinvent myself in that organization too.
What was the seed then for 20%? Like how did that come about?
In my last few years at Accenture, I was the executive sponsor of disability inclusion. And I'd never really thought about what having a disability. It had never really been spoken about for the majority of my career. And diversity and inclusion has evolved quite a long ways, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years. And companies are, beginning to think about it's more than just gender. And disability inclusion was part of that. And I began to see the importance of being a senior leader with a disability and being vocal and having a voice.
Mm.
And I really loved it. And I really loved, and I saw that there was lots of opportunity, but it was my plus one.
Yeah.
It wasn't the main part of my job. And I think because I'd left Accenture and come back, I had had the realization that, this is not the only place to have a career. And my kids had finished school, high school, and I thought I was at the right time to go and do something else. And I thought, what if? What if I jump off this cliff of leaving a regular income, and what if I try it on? Um, and I thought, if it doesn't work out, I can go back and get a real job. And now I'm almost 3 years in, and I can't imagine ever going back. It's been such a joy to be my own boss. It's been hard because, when you're your own boss, you don't get a regular income.
It's a
You've
bit
got to
different.
actually hustle and you've got to
Yeah.
think ahead. But I've loved the flexibility and the freedom that it's given me to make my own decisions. Now, freedom, there's light and dark to everything. You're responsible for yourself, and if something doesn't go wrong, you're also responsible. Um, I feel like my Accenture years gave me really good training, and
Mm.
I think it's been able to combine my consulting experience with something that I was deeply passionate with and I saw a need. And I feel like I'm in that special place in the middle where I'm doing what I love. It doesn't feel like work. Um,
Created your own real job.
I've created my own job. That's exactly right. And one of the reasons why I've gone back to university is although my lived experience is important, disability is varied and complex. And I wanted to go and learn more about this industry and this area and think about how I could deepen my knowledge. And I've loved that as well. If I could be a full-time student, I would love to be a full-time student.
There's
Yeah,
so many threads, Emma, that I love through all of that. And like I just reflect on some of them about, I even love your language about trying it on. You've tried on the librarian, tried
yep,
on the accountant, just trying on these next phases is lovely. I know when you and I first met and we had a conversation, leaving Accenture the second time to start
yep,
your own business wasn't something that you just decided one morning when you got up. Like there was a bit of a process for you to go through. And I meet so many execs kind of at the precipice of that as well. How did you come to that decision?
I probably workshopped it for about a year with a group of, I'm going to say, trusted advisors. The main one being my partner, who has his own business as well. And I thought about, I didn't just leave Accenture and the next day go have this idea. Um, I thought about, well, what would be my value proposition? What would I sell? Who would be my clients? Why would someone buy work off me? Do I want to start a big company? Do I want to employ other people? Do I want to just be by myself? What's my financial headroom? How long can I go without paying myself? Because you don't leave corporate life one day and a month later you get a paycheck from your new place. What are the actual practical things I need to do to set myself up for success? And I think the other thing I thought about, and we'll talk, we can come to the non-executive director career. I've been preparing for that for about 10 years of trying to get the relevant experience in good non-for-profits to start to build that capability as well. So I thought about how could I turn some of that director experience into paid income? Um, and who can I speak to that's doing this that can give me some insight? So who do I know in my network that's done this before? And they could share with me. And I got some really good advice that it takes about 2 years to get income from a non-executive director career.
Mm.
And that has definitely been my experience. So I thought about it, I tested it out. I began to think about what would my thing be. Um, I wanted to give myself time off between sort of jobs, and I left just before Christmas. But I also didn't want to spend 6 months doing all the behind the scenes stuff of setting up a website, of buying, all that stuff that I think we can give ourselves comfort is, but it doesn't earn money.
No.
And the last thing I did was I told people what I was doing. So my first client I got for 20%, I did the company director's course and I just had left Accenture and they go around and they say, who do you work for? So I said, I'm the CEO of 20%. And someone in the break said, tell me more. And that became my first client. And it was a very small client. So I think telling other people what you're doing is really important because you never know where they might know someone who can connect you. Or so I'm a big believer in the clients aren't just going to knock on the door.
No.
You've actually got to actually tell people.
Yeah.
I also thought about my LinkedIn story. And I started talking about disability inclusion probably on LinkedIn, probably 2 years before I left Accenture.
Right.
So I started to think about what my brand was and what was I known for and how could I really pivot my career. Um,
You went
and
viral on LinkedIn.
I did go viral on LinkedIn. So part of, you set up a new company and you go, well, I need some photos. And I'd never had a headshot before that showed I had one hand. And I don't know why that had never occurred to me. I didn't think it was relevant. And I thought, well, right, if I'm going to do this role, I've actually got to show I have a disability, show I have some skin in the game. So I had a friend very quickly take a photo of me. It was, I was being interviewed on the radio, and I thought this is a great time to actually launch my business and put the photo up on LinkedIn. And I talked about the story of showing my disability, and it went viral. I got over, I think it was 1.7 million views of it,
Wow.
26,000 likes. I tell my kids I'm an influencer now.
By being
Uh,
you, by being you.
but that's the thing, by being authentic and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think I've definitely, the power of being vulnerable as a senior leader, of showing a bit of yourself, it really seemed to resonate.
Mm.
And I'm a big believer in that you've got to show vulnerability. And it's something that I talk about with my clients that if you want people to pitch up at work and be their authentic selves, you've got to be authentic as well.
Mm.
And over my career, a lot of people have spoken about balance of work life. I think there's flow. And I think we have to show parts of ourselves in all places that we are. And we've got to have boundaries and we've got to work out where that line is. But for me, talking about my disability in a public place, in a virtual public place, I can't tell other people to do that if I'm not prepared to do that myself.
Mm.
So that was really the launch, and I managed to get work off that photo. And it always amuses me that it was something that was completely unplanned. But it's the power of showing up and showing a part of yourself that perhaps you haven't shown before.
I know
And
you joke. I was going to say, I know you joke that the kids call you an influencer, but you
I
you are.
Well, I think, look, and I was talking to someone yesterday about LinkedIn. And people go, well, it used to be that you'd only use it if it was advertising yourself if you want a job.
Yeah.
And I always look people up before I meet them. I always look at their stories. I see who I've got in common with them. And it's a great place to have a point of view and share that point of view. So I like to think, what am I going to be known for? What's my brand? And so I'm very deliberate with my posts on LinkedIn. I think about them. And I'd encourage everyone to do that because you never know. You can be known for something and you can follow people that are known for those things. I have read books and contacted the author on LinkedIn and had great conversations. Um, I have found people to sponsor me by contacting them and being genuine in that connection. I've made friends. So I think
We
it's
found each other on LinkedIn.
that's it. I think we underestimate the power of those platforms, but you have to work out it's not Facebook, it's not Instagram. There are boundaries. And I think over time, LinkedIn's become people have shown more of themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that that can only make people better in a work environment as well.
What's the ideal mix for you? It's a portfolio career that you've
Yeah.
got as you juggle the boards and 20% as well. What's the kind of ideal mix do you think? And then let's get on to that portfolio career and some of your reflections around being on boards.
My ideal mix is that I'll always do one board for free. This is very important to me. So and I've just rolled off Leadership Victoria, and there's one that's upcoming. So I've made space. And the reason for that is that I could work for free all week.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to work out where that line is. And it's a great way and I have volunteered on board. So for me, I do one pro bono board. Um, I have two regional wards in Victoria, so I have to think about getting there, travel. We do some stuff virtually, but it's important to actually be in the room with people and be in the room of the business that you're a board of. Um, it's probably about half for me, half in terms of half board work and then half consulting work.
Mm.
The good thing about boards is that you can get your diary sort of coordinated probably a year in advance. So I know when I have capacity and I know when I don't have capacity. Um, my calendar's a bit ninja-like. I know the things that I can move and the things that I can't move. I like having flexibility in my day that I can choose how much I work.
Mm.
No one pays me to go on annual leave, but I can choose to take time off. But again, I can work really hard to make sure I can afford to do that. So I think I'm at about the right mix now. Um, I've been deliberate in the types of organizations that I've wanted to become involved with. Um, you know, I I'm a big believer in playing to your strengths. So why did I choose to go on a water board? Because I have utilities experience
Mm.
and I have a combination of financial, being a chartered accountant, I have technology experience, and I have some risk experience in my tool bag. So I think about all my skills and how can I highlight them for the particular role that I'm applying for. I haven't got everything I've applied for. Um, which I think is a good thing. You have to go through a recruitment process for boards as well, and you have to but no one's going to again knock on your door. You have to put yourself out there. So
Can
it's
I
been
ask?
oh, sorry, you go.
No, go. It's been a.
I was just going to say, that transition from exec to board, you have to reshape your experience, I think, and transform because they are different skills.
Mm.
And one of the pieces of feedback I got from a chair when I first started my board career was, you really have to consciously think of your questions. So you're not doing the deep dive, you're not the executive. And it's very conscious. It's hard to do. And it's still, I'm sure I don't get it right all the time, but thinking about your governance role and what are the questions you ask, because that's our best tool to have. So preparation. So you've got to make sure you've got time in your diary to read the bunch of 500 pages and
Yeah.
to think thoughtfully about what is the thing I want to know more of? What is the question? Um, and then if someone else asks that question, you don't have to be the person always that raises a voice in the boardroom because you're under usually limited time as well. But
Mm.
that's the homework I give myself is what is the three questions on this paper I want to ask, or what is the thing that's not there?
What am I
That's
not?
on what am I not being told?
Yeah.
Um, or what have I seen in the organization that hasn't come to the boardroom as well?
How do you assess if the relationship between the board and the management team is working well? What are the key things that you are looking for?
I think openness, how bad news is shared.
Mm.
I always think that if you only hear from the CEO or managing director, that's a little red flag. You want to hear from different people. So I think A, it gives experience, and B, you get a different perspective. I love a tour of an organisation, and I love going out and meeting the staff. But I also like to do it in a non-sanitized way if I get
Yeah.
opportunity, because having been an executive, I know how board tours can get
Yeah.
managed. Um, I think if you can get some sense of the safety culture, for example, by seeing what safety looks like outside the boardroom,
Mm.
that's really important. Um, I think also seeing what the quality of the board papers are is a good measure and thinking about what you aren't being told. Um, it's always a challenge. I think also spending time in person. So one of my boards, it's a 4 hour drive from Melbourne, or three and a half hour drive from Melbourne. Half of us are not from the region. We do committee meetings on one day, have a dinner together that night, and have the board meeting the next morning. And I think getting to know people and their working styles is key. But it takes a while because you're not with these people every day.
No.
You have to build some rapport and some respect. They have to do the same for you. And I think getting to know people personally is still important as well.
All about relationships, isn't it?
It,
Really?
it is all about relationships because if you have a trusted relationship, people will tell bad news.
Yeah.
Because as a board, we sometimes have to hear bad news, and it's focusing on, well, what do we need to do now, not whose fault it is.
Yeah.
And I think my experience of working in IT, where there's always issues, usually on a Friday night, um, you never focus on whose fault it is, you focus on fixing the problem. And then you can do the deep dive after you've restored whatever the issue is. And I think that's been an important skill that I've learned because things do go wrong. We live in a complex world,
Mm.
and we have to be prepared for things going wrong and thinking about how, as a board, we're going to deal with it. One of the boards I'm on has a WhatsApp chat that we only use for emergencies. We only use it's go and look at your email, or this has been said, or we need to have a call. Um, and we've had that when bushfires have gone through an area and from an emergency point of view. And we've wanted so also the organisation can manage any anxieties that the board might have. So we're not all going speaking to the exec separately,
Trying to get in at once.
trying to get in at one. So that's worked really well.
What about with CEOs? Have you had to look for new CEOs or change CEOs?
So three of my boards actually over my time, two have been resigned and one left well, they've all resigned, but one was quite quickly. So different situations. I think it's the most important job a board can do is to appoint the CEO. So a couple of things, understanding where the organisation is strategically and what they need. Because what an organisation needs is going to morph and change over the time. Do we need a steady pair of hands? Do we need a calming influence? Do we need an innovative CEO? Do we need someone to manage a big transformation of change? Do we need brand new ideas? All those questions are going to dictate who you need in the driving seat going forward. Um, what's our internal pipeline? Do we go out to market to test the market? Um, what is the culture that we want the organisation to be, and how will that new CEO manage that culture? And I've seen it done with, with a very small non-for-profit. So different type of skills needed to a very large organisation as well. So I think understanding what the organisation needs is really important to find the right person.
I'm always interested in how boards nurture new CEOs into the role. And new can be new to the organisation, but new can also very often be first time as a CEO. Like, have you got any thoughts about that? Because I think that's so critical.
I think making sure you know what the person needs and saying to the CEO, the new CEO, whether they're a first time, is what do you need and how can we help you supply that? And also checking in on our own expectations, especially if you've had a seasoned CEO be replaced by a first time CEO. They're going to need different things.
Mm.
And also saying to the new CEO, we don't expect you to be a replica of the old CEO. I think that's really important. Um, and it's going to be different. And especially if you've got a seasoned CEO that's left and they've been with the organization a long time, and giving that person permission to put their own stamp on things. Um, yeah, I think it's true. But having that open relationship and saying to that person, what do you need from us? And this is what we need from you. I'm a big believer in that people can't read other people's minds. And in my own career, I've always been, and I've taken that advice is if I want something, I have to be able to articulate it, whatever that is. And I think that's the same of a CEO. What are their expectations of us? What extra help do they need? Do they need a coach? As they transition perhaps into that, that CEO place, because CEOs can have very lonely jobs
Yes.
because they don't have people necessarily in their organization. They don't have a peer. I think the chair CEO relationship is really important in that situation. I mean, it's always important, but I think it's especially important when you have a CEO transition and making sure that that chair CEO meet each other's expectations, which you can only establish if you know what their expectations are.
So, Emma, if I turn my mind now to, we talk about diversity, and if I think about the ASX 300, so the top 300 listed organisations in the Australian market, there's a lack of disability diversity that you shared with me. What, let's talk about that. Like, share your thoughts on that, and like, what can we learn from other diversity initiatives to actually lead some change in this space?
I mean, it's not just a lack. If I sort of there was research that comes out every year by Watermark International, and they measure all sorts of diversity elements. And we have zero directors on the ASX 300 that have identified with a disability. Now, I say identified because we know that disability is one of the reasons why I called my company 20%, is 20% of Australians have a disability. So let's think about that. A fifth of the population has a disability, and yet we have zero representation on those boards, on the places that big decisions are being made. And all our superannuation funds would have shares in those organisations. We shop in those organisations, we fly in those organisations, we bank in them. If disability is not at those tables, something's missing. I think that the fact that, and I say identified because my sense is that there would be directors with disabilities. that haven't publicly shared those shared whatever disability they have. And I feel quite lucky. It's the only word all time I use lucky is that you can see that I have one hand.
Mm.
Invisible disabilities we can't see. Um, what can we learn from other diversity and inclusion cohorts? I mean, we haven't got complete parity with women yet from a gender point of view, but gee, we're a long way further because we measured it.
Yes.
We had allies that stepped up. Think of the champions of change. We had people say, well, where are the women? This doesn't feel right. And I think there are still a few boards that don't have women representation, but most boards do. You know, in the government sector where I work on my two boards, the Victorian government has quotas for gender. You walk into a room of the water board directors in Victoria and it's half-half.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have to do something different. It's not going to get there by itself.
Mm.
And I'd also encourage senior leaders that do have a disability where they're comfortable with to share that with their teams because by sharing it there's a contagion effect. Um, Majority of disability occurs to people over 65. And if you look at the average age of directors,
Yes.
hearing loss, mobility issues, we need to design for our future selves. And I would just encourage directors that have a disability, please share that because I know that we're there. And I'd also ask recruiters to look in places that perhaps they haven't looked for. Um, there's organisations such as the Disability Leadership Institute. We know there's a whole cohort of new directors that have got their qualifications through the AICD with disabilities. There's groups like the Observership Project. We are there, we're out in the community, we're qualified, but we can't do it by ourselves. We need people to give us a hand up. And that's what I'd encourage those people that are on that board with the disability that haven't shared it, at least think about who's in the pipeline that they could perhaps help, you know, help create that capacity by creating a pipeline succession.
I want to ask a question that, it probably sounds in some ways like an obvious question, but yet
Yep.
I don't think it is an obvious question because we're still trying to answer the question for
Yeah.
gender as an example. But it's like, what are we missing? I mean, you talked about you started 20% because you've got lived experience of what the challenges and opportunities are navigating corporate Australia with a disability. What are we missing? What is that? What's that like? What do we need to know?
Look, I think what we're missing is that we are very, well, I don't say what's missing. I'll rephrase the question to what's there. I think there's fear. I
Yeah.
think we are much more comfortable attracting people like ourselves
Mm. In every way,
in
shape.
every way. And we all have unconscious bias. We
Mm.
are all biased
Mm.
and being aware of that bias. And when you think about that you attract someone like yourself, if you don't have a disability or you don't come from a culturally and linguistically background or you're not Indigenous, for example, um, it's harder to find those underrepresented groups. Um, I think the other part is there's fear. There's
Mm.
fear of the unknown on both sides. I see organisations that are fearful of doing the wrong thing, so they don't know what to do, so it paralyzes them into
They do nothing.
inertia. They do nothing. There's fear on the other side that if I tell you I have dyslexia, you will hold that against me. I
Yeah.
won't be qualified. So I've got very good, for example, at hiding that
Yeah.
and compensating by myself. Because when I've shared that previously, maybe it's gone against me, for example.
Mm.
Um, there's a big Australian organisation, there was some research by the Australian Network of Disability that they had to ask 3 times through the recruitment process if people needed any reasonable adjustments, any adjustments. And it was on the third time the potential candidate would say yes. So there's
Mm.
a lack of trust.
Yes.
Okay, so you put all that in and you've had bad experiences. You've got organizations that are so fearful of offending. We've got a big cancel culture. It's easier for them to do nothing. Disability is not sexy. There are some disabilities that are much sexier than others that are more acceptable. But there's some disabilities that aren't sexy and they're hard. And we assume, and we also in a society that assumes people's capacity to do something. So when you wrap all that up, um, with the media that predominantly talks about disability with the NDIS, so you think about what people goes into people's psyche, that disability is a cost to the community. Um, it's you often see that, and I've had this happen to me, that people go, "You're inspiring, but I feel sorry for you."
Mm.
That's a very hard place to sit. And when you think about the stories of disability in the media, and it is changing, we don't see disability just in normality of just being people doing just normal things. Isn't it inspiring that we see this person do this? Or
Yes.
I feel so sorry for this person. And I think they're some of the challenges and opportunities that we have to we have to face. Um, I now see my disability as a superpower
Mm.
because it helps me solve problems. I've always had to solve problems. Try tying up your shoes with one hand. It's quite difficult, or changing a toddler's nappy with one hand, quite difficult. So in my everyday work,
Yeah.
or in my everyday life, I solve problems. I see the world differently. We know diversity, diverse ways of thinking leads to better solutions. So why wouldn't a board, which is the ultimate decision-making table in an organization, want to bring in some of that innovation and diversity to think differently? Um, or why would you want to consciously exclude 20% of the population?
Yeah.
Because we have money, we're consumers, we're family members. We often travel together, we don't often travel by ourselves, for example. So why wouldn't you want to capitalize? And we're an underemployed sector of the community.
Mm.
So in markets that are hard to find people for, why wouldn't you want to look differently at how to find those markets? Um, and this is really the crux of why I wanted to start 20%, because I want to be part of the solution. I want to turn the dial on disability inclusion. I'm tired, I'm 55, I'm tired of waiting for someone else to do
To
it.
do it. Yeah.
And I don't want this, I want disability to be so normalized that we don't even need to think about it. It's just accepted as part of the human condition.
Emma, thank you so much. I agree with you. To have that experience and that voice at the table, I think is incredibly valuable and necessary to start the change and to start the conversations. You mentioned earlier that missing out on the MD role at Accenture was a big piece of feedback for you during your career and ended up being a good thing. Are there other things that stand out for you that, might have been hard to hear along the way, like from someone about something you needed to change or do?
Look, I think we've all had feedback. I mean, feedback's never easy to hear. And I think we naturally like to only hear good feedback. I mean, I've probably had the same feedback that other women have had. Bossy,
Thank
um,
goodness.
thank goodness. But, I know that when I get really stressed, I get very autocratic.
Mm-hmm.
So I've learnt that about myself, but I still find it, and I think that's also been one of the challenges transitioning into a board director. If I'm stressed about something, I
Yes.
want to know more detail.
Yeah.
That's how I satisfy that. I've had that feedback before, so I try to be more self-aware and conscious of it. Um, I think as I've got older, I've turned to, it used to be you get performance reviews around these are your areas for development. And I'm a big believer is now let's play to our strengths.
Yeah.
Let's not go for jobs that we're never going to be as good in our weaknesses as we are in our strengths.
Mm.
So I'd say that's been the insight I've got as I've got older. So don't try to stay in an area that you're not good at. Um, because I can get better, but I'll never be great at it. Um, I'm a terrible speller. It's thank God for AI now with things like
Yeah.
Grammarly, and I've learnt to try to find tools to get better at things. And also, if I know that I'm really weak at something, I'll try to outsource it or find someone else to do it. And I think I've got the confidence now to go, I've given myself permission is I don't have to be good at everything.
Don't have to do everything. Absolutely not.
Which I think growing up in the 80s, we were told, Superwoman, you have to do everything. And I used to
Don't ask
think,
for help.
don't ask for help, work it out by yourself. And it is really hard. And that's why I don't believe in balance,
Mm,
because balance implies you have to get it right every day. And when we think about the components of our life, there are some days that some elements are more prominent than others. But make a conscious decision about it, be intentional about it.
yeah.
You don't have to get everything right at one point in time.
You're singing like music to my ears in terms of a few things there. Number one being intentional, but the other one of my very first interviews was with Sarah Harden. I don't know if you know Sarah, but she's the co-founder with Reese Witherspoon and CEO of Hello Sunshine over in.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I play this clip all the time for people where it talks about when you're assessing yourself, zoom out, widen the lens because you're not going to be a perfect mum every day. You're not going to be a perfect executive every day. You're not going to be a perfect friend every day, but widen the lens and have a look at it again. So could not agree more. Emma, you're a lifelong learner and, evidenced by the fact that you're back studying now
Yep.
to make sure that you're not just bringing your lens to the work you're doing. It's much
Yep.
broader than that. What would you call that as the best investment you ever made in your own career along the way?
That's a great question. I think, and I was reflecting on this morning about what would I say with this. I think the best investment was actually leaving Accenture, giving
Yeah,
myself permission to actually try something different and to take a path that wasn't the same as everyone else.
yeah.
Because there's no prize for answering emails, or getting to the end of your inbox, of being
Oh, what?
perfect. I
What?
know there's no prize. And I think that's the best investment is giving myself permission to
Yeah,
let some of those things go. Yes, I have invested in courses. I did an amazing course in 2018, Williamson Community Leadership with Leadership Victoria. It opened my eyes up to that you can see leadership not just in a corporate sense, it's
yes,
everywhere in the
yes.
community. Um, that was a great gift to myself. Deciding to go back to university, but I think also being having a very curious and open mind and
Mm,
not think you can learn things from your kids, you can learn things from their friends. They see the world differently than how I see it now. So being really curious, I think, has been the greatest gift I've lent into, and just giving myself permission to fail. It's okay to fail, and I fail a lot at things. Um, and I do have this little principle. It's called the Bear Grylls scenario. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? And if I can think through the worst case scenario and mentally cope with that, that's like my little trick. What is the worst thing? Is someone going to die?
yeah.
Um, and just be curious and keep reading and getting information from different places, and talking to people. I would say they're the gifts. So it's not, I think I've just become more comfortable with being who I am
Mm.
and realizing I don't have to be like someone else.
Is there a cool book you've read recently? Like with a start as a librarian and reading, is there
I'm
something?
really keen to read Jacinta Ardern's book on
Oh, I've
leadership
seen that.
about
Yeah, good.
kindness and empathy.
Yeah.
Um, there's a great book I read about, oh, there's a couple of books. Leading a Good Life by Hugh McKay. I think that's how you say his. He's a sociologist, does a lot of research, and I really love his observations about life. And I read another good book around happiness. There was a big study out of Harvard, the big long and short study about that they follow people throughout their lives and the insights. And I think it's called The Good Life or something like that. And I can send you the book after. But what makes a good life?
Mm.
And when they follow these people over a 70-year time frame, it's human connection.
Yeah.
It's not being the smartest in the room. They followed a group of Harvard graduates, and I think it started after the Second World War, and it was the ones that had human connection and community connection that were really happy. It wasn't the richest people. It wasn't the person with the biggest house or the biggest bank balance. It was that human connection. And I'm a big believer in that I think you always need something to do. You always need the next thing. I don't know if I always want to work as hard as I worked earlier in my career, but
Yeah.
I want to work intentionally and I want to keep having that human connection. Um,
Wonderful phase for you in your career. Happy birthday for your
oh,
recent
thank you.
birthday.
Thank you.
And thank you for, well, as we discussed earlier, both of us really getting up and popping some lipstick on at the start of a long weekend. Emma, I'd love to ask you the question I ask everybody at the end of our conversations, and that is, what does brave feminine leadership mean to you? And do you think it needs to change?
It means being authentic to who you are. I think that we don't have to be like anyone else. We are enough as ourselves. And I think when you realize that, life becomes a lot less, it's not a race. So I think being brave is being brave to your authentic self. There's only one you. So
Mm.
be the best you can be. Um, I work with chief executive women. I'm a facilitator on their leaders program, and that is a big theme for us is lean into your strengths, know what they are, and amplify them. So that's what I think being brave is often when we work in these big corporate environments, we look at what the people that have been successful in that environment and we want to be like them. Because we think if we're like them, we're going to be successful. Being brave is being like you.
Yeah. Beautifully said, Emma. Thank you so much for joining our conversation.
Pleasure.